So in this session, we're going to cover the RibbonBar control that was added in PowerBuilder 2019. First, we have a legal disclaimer. Let's go over the agenda. So in case people don't know who I am, I thought I'd introduce myself for a little bit. Then I'm going to show you a demo of the RibbonBar, just so you see what it looks like. Then we'll talk about the various components that make up the RibbonBar, the syntax for creating and modifying the RibbonBar, and then look at the RibbonBar builder that's built into the IDE. And then I've got a couple more demos, one where I created a generic user object so that you could have some reuse between your applications for the RibbonBar control. And then I've got another demo where I've created a utility that will read your current PowerBuilder menu types and generate a RibbonBar control based on them. Okay, so a little bit about me first. My name is Bruce Armstrong. I work for a company called Integrated Data Services. I joined them in 2004. Prior to that, I spent 15 years doing independent contracting as a PowerBuilder developer. The company I'm at now, at the time I joined them, was also doing PowerBuilder development as an ISV. We have since converted most of our applications over to HTML5 JavaScript with Java in the middle tier, but we do have a couple customers that still use the PowerBuilder version of the applications. In addition to the PowerBuilder, I'm fluent in Oracle PL SQL, Java, C#, and somewhat fluent in C++. I've been involved in a number of open source projects, the open source PFC libraries. I help support those. I wrote a utility called PBNI SMTP. That's a PowerBuilder native interface, so it's C++ that allows you to send SMTP emails from PowerBuilder. And then I wrote a plugin for Jenkins, actually a couple of them, but the one in here in particular is one that uses the autocompile utility that was introduced in 2017 and is available in 2019 as well, to do command line compiles so that Jenkins can do automatic PowerBuilder application compiles. So if you're looking for getting into continuous integration, that might be something you want to look at. A little bit about the company I work for, and let's launch on into the demo here. Okay, so this isn't going to be necessarily the world's best example of what you can do with the RibbonBar control, and you can ignore all these buttons down here. This is a little sample I put together. It shows how you can use PowerScript to modify all the different properties that I'll be discussing here in a bit. But basic RibbonBar control has this first button is actually called an application button, and that actually will display a menu very similar to your current PowerBuilder menu. So if you've got users who like menus, want to go away from menus, you can still provide them with a menu. Okay. Then you've got the categories, and then within categories, these are called panels, and I'll cover this here in a little bit. And then you've got the different kinds of controls that you can put onto the RibbonBar itself. They're small buttons, large buttons, check boxes, combo boxes, and they even have a drop-down button implemented through what's called the default command. And then there's also tooltips. There you go. So you got a tooltip text and a tooltip description there. And before I forget, over here on the right, there are some toolbar buttons as well. Okay, so that's what the ribbon control looks like. Okay, now that we've seen what RibbonBar looks like running, let's see how we put it together. So the reason I'm going to be going through the structure of the RibbonBar is because when you put together the syntax for creating it, it's an XML file that has a nested structure. You actually see a piece of it down there. And so it's important to know what the elements are and where they appear in the structure, and what all the properties are that you can set. The toolbar builder actually does a pretty good job of giving you some IntelliSense that will help walk you through that. But we're going to go over it anyway here. So the master, outside container is called RibbonBar. There's a container within it called Ribbon Items, but it doesn't. There's no visible display for that. The RibbonBar itself is the entire RibbonBar. Ribbon Items is just a container, and the items within the Ribbon Items is the application button. That's the first, if you will, tab on the menu. It's actually just, it's not really a tab, it's just the first button there. And what happens when you click on that one is a menu drops down. So that's your application button. Then the categories are all the remaining tabs. And then the tab buttons are the buttons that appear in the upper right hand corner of the ribbon control. Okay, so let's look at what's in the application button. So within the application button, there's the application menu. That's this whole thing. There's two sections to that. There is the master items, which are the standard items, and in this case I've made them match the tabs. You don't necessarily have to do that. And they can be nested and have shortcuts, basically like a PowerBuilder standard menu item. So if your users like to use standard menu items, you can still provide them with that capability. On the other one is the recent menu. This is where this is dynamic, and this is where you would add items. Let's say if you wanted to keep a list of the recently opened windows, you could put that there. And then within the recent menu, there's items as well, and a lot of similarity and a few differences between the items that you put in the master and the items you put in the recent. And we'll get to that here in a minute. So here's your categories. These are the tabs going across your ribbon bar. Within the categories, I should say, is the container. Then there's one or more category within that container, and then each category will have one or more panels within it, and then optionally you can have groups within a panel, and this is primarily for layout control. If you like, in order to get these two buttons to appear next to each other, as I've done here, I used a group to do that. Because otherwise they would align vertically like the copy and paste did over here. So that's why I used a group control there. Then what you can put within the panel is small button, large button, checkbox, and combo box. So then up in the upper right, that's your tab buttons. That's just a container. And then the individual tab buttons, they're optional, and you can have a number of them. Okay. Something I'll note here, because it's not entirely obvious what this particular property does, but the large button, small button, and tab buttons all have a default command property that is set to true by default, which means it just behaves like a button. But if you set it to false, what that means is that it's a drop-down button. In other words, you're going to have menu items appearing when that button is clicked. So instead of that button firing an event, it'll just drop down a menu, and then the menu items within that will then fire their own events. Okay, and we'll come to that in a little bit. So the syntax that you're going to use to create the RibbonBar control can be put in either XML or in JSON. Normally when you're editing it, if you're going to edit it using the RibbonBar designer, it generates XML syntax, but there's an option to take that XML syntax and then convert it into JSON if you want. You can create and modify the RibbonBar control dynamically through PowerScript. I'm not sure I would create it using PowerScript because that would be rather tedious, but certainly you can modify it dynamically using PowerScript. So every one of those objects and properties I just got done describing, not only can you set in the XML or JSON, but then you can access them through functions in JavaScript, in PowerScript. There's going to be a couple, some small variations in the syntax, and I'll cover those. So the RibbonBar also is themable. They provide 5 themes, and it matches the 5 themes that are supplied by Appeon with PowerBuilder 2019. The no theme at all, or the 4 flat designs, blue, dark, gray, and silver. Also, there's a number of property. Well, there's a font property for the RibbonBar control for all the text that displays in it. It has a font name property. That's what you specify in the JSON or XML. However, when you are if you decide to modify it at runtime, you actually use the face name and font char set properties instead of the font name. So that's one of the places where there's a variation between what you would be doing in the XML or JSON to construct the data window, construct the RibbonBar to begin with, and how you would access it dynamically in PowerScript. I did want to point out, I skipped over that a little bit. I said you wouldn't create the RibbonBar control in PowerScript. What you would normally do is just load that JSON or XML file to create your RibbonBar control. So it's a single command that loads that script, that file, or that string to create the RibbonBar control. What I meant by not creating it dynamically in PowerScript is you wouldn't go through adding every control individually through a PowerScript command. Okay, and then the font for the RibbonBar control also has a text size property, and that's the same both in the XML or JSON and in the PowerScript when you're accessing it. The application button has 4 properties. Pretty simple stuff: enabled, visible, true, false. A tag value you just use internally if you want to tag it, and the text value that actually displays in the application. These are the master items. These are the items that appear within the application button in the master section. So some of the stuff is pretty standard. A clicked event, a selected event. That's pretty standard. Enabled, true, false, visible, true, false. That's pretty standard. A tag value that you use internally, and the text that might appear, that would appear in the menu item. That's fine. Picture name. No surprise there. It can be system enumerated or an image file that you provide. What's a little unusual, if you're, particularly if you're familiar with PowerBuilder menus, one is in the PowerBuilder menu, the shortcut is part of the text. And in the RibbonBar control, it's actually a separate property, so that's kind of nice. The other one is that the checked property doesn't actually check the menu item. What it does is it puts a blue box around the picture. It tends to make it look selected. So that's the effect that checked has. And then there's a type. It's called an item type when you're accessing it in PowerScript. It's not modifiable at runtime. And the 2 values it can have in the JSON XML or when you access it to read it in PowerScript is either normal or separator. And if you've worked with PowerBuilder menus, you're familiar with the separator, which is just a horizontal line that separates groups of menu items. Okay. The recent, this is the container for all your recent items, only has one property, and that's the title. And so in the example I showed, I had it called recent items. You might say recently opened windows, or whatever text you want to have appear there. So the items within the recent are very similar to the master items. There are some differences though. A recent item doesn't have, well, it has a picture name property. The picture name property doesn't do anything, so specifying it has no effect. Also, because there's no picture, setting the check property has no effect. Because normally what it would do, at least in a master item, is it would highlight the picture. But since there's no picture, this doesn't do anything. But the clicked event, selected event, that's standard. Enabled and visible properties, a shortcut combination, tag text. That's all exactly the same as what we saw in the master items. The only other difference here is the item type. The only value for an item type in the recent items is 2, indicating that it's a recent item. And so it doesn't make any sense to really set it to anything in the script, in the JSON or XML, and if you ever read it in PowerScript, it would always read 2. Okay, let's look at what the category properties are. No real surprise there. A tag and a text, and enabled and visible properties. This is, in other words, in reminder, the categories are the tabs going across the top of your toolbar. The ribbon bar, I should say. Within your category, you have panels. So it has a number of properties here. Few of them aren't surprising. Enabled and visible properties. No surprise there. Tag and text. No surprise there. The picture names, rather unusual. What happens normally when you display the ribbon bar, you would not see, the picture name would have no effect. You wouldn't see, what you would see are the items within the panel. The only time the picture name comes into effect is if you resize the window, and so that the ribbon bar is resizing, and it gets to the point where the panel gets compressed to the point where it can no longer display the individual items within it. And what happens at that point is that the panel then is replaced by what you specified in the picture name. And then when you click on that, the items show up underneath the picture. Okay. The group, now this is optional. It's a formatting option within a panel. It has the following properties. Enabled and visible, no surprise there. A tag value. The one that you might want to make note of here is the new line. So if you put items in a panel, they vertically align. If you put them in a group, they horizontally align. If you want to put them in a group and have them vertically align, then you turn on the new line property. Now note, there's 4 items that you can put in a panel. That's the small box, checkbox, combo box, and large button. Make sure I said that right. Small button, checkbox, combo box, and large button. All 4 can go in a panel. Only 3 of those can go in a group. The small button, the checkbox, and the combo box. You can't put large buttons within a group. Okay, let's look at the properties of the large and small button. Many of these are no surprise. Clicked and selected events, the shortcut, the text, the tag. There's a power tip, so you have a text and description for the power tip. There's a picture for the button, obviously. It can be system enumerated or when you provide. We talked about the default command earlier. So if the default command is set to false, that means that the clicked event and selected events won't do anything. Instead, clicking on this button will drop down a list of items that you've defined within it. The one one thing that seems, that, well, you need to adjust to is that checked. I mean, you don't check a command button. What that does is it makes it appear selected. It puts a blue sort of square around the image and makes it appear selected. I think I covered everything there. Let's talk about the checkbox. So many of these, once again, are no surprise. Enabled true false, visible true false, selected and clicked events, shortcut, tag text, all standard stuff. This is the case where checked actually means checked. So yeah, if you want to set the checkbox to checked, you set it true. You don't want to check, set it to false. The other item you should point out here is that there's a three-state property. So if you set three-state to true, that means that you can have the indeterminate state as well. And then when the checkbox is in it has three states, then the third state property, true false, if it's set to true, indicates that the checkbox is in that indeterminate state. Let's look at the combo box. This has got a whole lot of properties, so there's a couple screens here. So the combo box can be editable. It can have an auto horizontal scroll to the box. Is a modified event, a selected event. Has a picture name. Once again, system enumerated or an image you provide. It has a power tip, just like the other controls, with the text and the description. The selected index is read-only. It lets you know what item was selected within the combo box. Use the selected item function to get that. And then there's a selection changed event. There's a sorted property, so you can sort the items or not within the combo box. Tag and text. What the text property here means is that it only has any effect at all if the combo box is editable. If it's not editable, it doesn't do anything. If it is editable, that's the text that appears by default in the combo box. Visible true false, vertical scroll bar, pretty standard stuff in the width. Okay, so these are the items within the combo box, and there's really just two properties. There's the text, and then there's a picture name. This is the tab button. So remember, on the upper right hand corner, there's small buttons that appear up there or can appear up there. They're optional. Number of properties similar to the other button controls. So clicked event, selected event, enabled, visible, default command, the checked making it appear selected, the picture name, the power tip, all pretty similar to the other button controls. The one difference here is that the tab button is normally just a button. It doesn't normally show text. If you provide text, it won't, and you provide a picture name, it will just show the picture name. If you provide text and don't show the picture name, then the text appears instead. So you have to do either or. Whereas the other button controls, you have text and button. Okay, so getting close to the end here of describing all these properties. I believe this is the last slide for as far as properties. This is the items within the menu for a button that you've declared is not default command. So, and it's very similar to the items that you have in, let's say, your menu item or your recent item. It has a clicked event, has a selected event, enabled true false, visible true false, shortcut, tag text. All that's pretty same. The type is it's very same as the as a normal item. It's got the normal and separator values. So pretty standard menu item there. Okay, so we're done talking about the properties. Let's talk about exactly how we create one of these now we know the syntax. So there's two ways you can get to the RibbonBar Builder. You can either select Tools on the top menu item and select RibbonBar Builder, or you can say File New, and then on the Tools, this is the Tools tab. It's off to the right there, but under the Tools option, there is a RibbonBar Builder. As I indicated earlier, the syntax when you're using the editor, the designer, is in XML, but there's options to import and export it in JSON if you'd rather work with JSON later. RibbonBar Control supports either one. You can load a file either way. So here's the menu item options on the RibbonBar Builder. Most of these are pretty simple. What I would point out is, let's say you wanted to, once you got done creating your ribbon bar, you wanted to create it in your application just by having a string variable in your application that you would then just pass into the function that creates the RibbonBar control. Well, the way you would do that is once you got done creating your ribbon bar, you would use this copy as PB string function, and that would format it correctly so that you could just paste it into a window someplace, window event, window function someplace, and then call the function that assigns that that creates the ribbon bar from that. And then if you wanted to edit that text later, what you would do is you would copy it out of the window event or function wherever it's at, and use the paste as PB string to put it back into the editor, back in the XML or JSON format, so you can modify it. The XML formatting just formats the XML. If you've been playing it with with the syntax by hand, and you've got the formatting messed up, you just say XML formatting, it'll straighten the formatting out. This is nice. This select the image button, I've got a picture of it here in a bit, brings up a dialog that makes it really easy to find the system enumerated images, if that's what you want to use. Import from JSON or an export to JSON, those are where I was talking about earlier, because when you're working with the RibbonBar Builder, you're working in XML, but if you want to have the file saved as JSON instead, then you just do the export to JSON, and then you just load that JSON file up, or you can just save the file and load XML, either way. But you could just save that file as JSON, load it into your application at runtime, and then if you wanted to edit it, you'd use the import from JSON option to load it into the editor, and gets converted back into XML. That's about it. The rest of the stuff is pretty standard. So this is what it looks like when you do a copy paste as PB string, and basically what it did is it put a opening quotation mark, and then it put these ampersands in, which is the line continuation character in PowerScript. So it just did that for you, so that you just take the XML directly out of the editor and paste it in your window. And this is what I was talking about earlier when you say select an image, and you can just hit this button right here and hit to say you want to provide your own image. Hit this. This is the browse button, and you just browse and find your own image. But the other thing you can do is this is a nice explorer for finding the system supplied icons, and it's got this search capability, so you can type in some text there. If you remember at least something about the name of the icon you're looking for, then you can type it in there, and the matching icons will show up, and then you can find the one you want. Here's your import export JSON. So this is a JSON format of the syntax for creating the ribbon bar. And then this is the options button, and it just shows you what the options are. Not much going on there. So for the first demo, what I want to look at is an object that I think would help make it easier for reuse of the RibbonBar control. The issue is that when I was referring to those clicked events and selected events in the RibbonBar control, the events that it calls have to have a certain signature. In some cases, they need to take a handle and an index, and sometimes they have to take a handle and an index and a subindex. And from that, then the window, whatever object's receiving that event, would then have to query back into the RibbonBar control to figure out exactly what object, what attribute was. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you could create one for every control in the RibbonBar. But the other thing you could do is you could have a single event that they call, and it could use that handle and index and some index if that's provided to query back into the RibbonBar control to figure out what button or what menu item was clicked on. I thought an easier way to do that was to have a user object that inherited from RibbonBar here, and put methods on it that would do that interrogation back to see what item had been clicked on. And if you've used PowerBuilder menus, what you do normally is you just trigger an event on the parent window, and you don't pass any arguments. You just trigger. If the user clicks on the cut button, usually you trigger like a UE cut event on the window, or if they click on a paste, you trigger a UE paste on the window. So I wanted to try to develop a user object that made that kind of still work. And so what I do, the way this works is that, remember that tag attribute I talked about that's on all those items. The idea is that you take and every one of your controls, you put into the tag a reference to the event basically that you want to call in the parent window. And so what happens is you have the syntax in the RibbonBar call the same event, and in the RibbonBar control, this user object, it then figures out what item was clicked, reads the tag attribute, and then it knows what event to call in the window. And that way you get a lot of reuse out of it that way, because you don't have to create a whole bunch of events that have this signature on it in the parent window to get the messages. You just create the UE cut, UE paste, whatever it was you want to implement, just like you would if you were doing a normal PowerBuilder window. And this sample code is available on the Code Exchange website, on the Appeon website, and so you can pull this down and look at it. But what I'm doing is I'm figuring out what kind of object was clicked on, and depending on the type of object, then I go in and read the tag attribute, construct the event name that I want to call based on that, and then call that on the parent window. So hopefully that would make things a little bit easier for you in your development. The other thing that might make things easier in your development, and I'll show these in a minute, but I just want to explain what they're going to be, is this utility I wrote to read PowerBuilder menus and toolbar items, basically, because they're part of the menu, and then create a RibbonBar syntax based on it. Now, menus can be inherited, and so while you could go in and read off a particular menu, if it's a descendant menu, there's going to be items in that menu syntax that aren't there because they're in the ancestor. And if you want to actually implement what's in this descendant window, you need to know what all the menu items are. So what I do is I have you select PowerBuilder target. I go find all the menus that are in that target. I display them. You double click on whichever menu item you want to generate syntax for. And what the application does here, and I call it an application because you have to actually run it. You can't run it out of the PowerBuilder IDE, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an add to library list, and that doesn't work when you're running in the IDE. That only works in an executable. So you take the compiled version of the utility, you select the target, it does the add to application library list with the pibbles that are in your application, and then that allows me to create this menu, this descendant menu. But once I've created it, it knows what the ancestor items are as well, and that way I can parse out both the ancestor items and the descendant menu items, and then create the syntax, the appropriate syntax for the toolbar that would correspond to what that menu is. So let's go ahead and take a look at those demos. Okay, so this is a demo of the user object, and it may have sounded rather convoluted during my description of it, but what I wanted to point out here, this, by the way, is the function you use to load the XML into the RibbonBar Control that creates the initial ribbon bar. But if you look at the events on this window, we've got the standard events that you would normally create if you were going to use a PowerBuilder menu. So I've got my copy, help, tile vertical. Let me do the save one up there. Save. That would then go off and do whatever it is they're supposed to do. Just for purposes of this demo, I just show a message box indicating what menu, what event got triggered. So, PowerBuilder standard kind of event, menu events. The other thing is, if you look at the syntax, for the demo. Oops. What I'm doing here is I have a tag value. So the tag says cut, copy, paste. So what's going to happen is what the user object is going to do is stick UE in front of this. It's going to read the menu, the RibbonBar Control, and just stick the word, the UE underscore prefix on whatever tag value it finds. So this will become, when the cut button is clicked, it will trigger UE cut. When you click copy, it's going to trigger UE copy, etc. Okay, so the only thing you have to do in order to implement the RibbonBar Control is just make sure you've got your tag values set, and you've created the appropriate events in your menu, in your window. That's what the point I was trying to make. So now if I click save, you see the save event got triggered. Cascade event gets triggered. And this is actually probably a better example of what a toolbar should look like than what I showed you in the first demo. Anyway, and so that's that user object I was talking about. The next is this utility that reads the menus and then parses out the syntax. The thing is, though, like I mentioned when I was describing it, you can't run it from the IDE because it doesn't add the library list. So we're going to have to go to the directory it's in and actually run it. Okay, so I'm going to say select the menu. I'll select this one, and this is what my slide was based off of. I've got an ancestor menu, a descendant menu. I double click that, and boom, it generates the syntax for it takes that entire menu, including the ancestor menu items, and generates the syntax that represents the toolbar that you're going to create from that. Okay, so let's so you see what that looks like. Let's just run this one. Actually, I don't have a script in there, but here you can see. So it's standard stuff. Okay. Let me go back and run that again. I'm going to copy that off. I'm going to go back to the IDE, open up the RibbonBar builder. Okay, I want to create a new one. I'm just going to paste in that syntax. And there's been a slight change in syntax. Since R2, this was written for R2, and in R3 it looks like they've changed the syntax slightly. And there, you get the menu. So, okay. So that's how that one works. Okay. So let's go back to the slides. And the last thing I would point out, I mentioned both of these code samples. The one where I've got the custom user object that's more generic, and this latest one that automatically generates the menu syntax for you, are both on Code Exchange. That's part of community.appeon.com. Most people probably know that because of the question answer forums there. But there's a number of other things up there, tech articles, blogs, and as I mentioned, the code samples for this session. So I'd suggest checking that out. Anyway, thanks for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Elevate 2020.